Good morning and welcome to Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. But right now it's 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Eastern. My name is Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and I will be your host. I got to get kind of used to the 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 because I was 7 to 9, and we'll be going back to 7 to 9 after I am done serving with my church for 21 days of prayer, and I'll make sure today to put the link in. So it's Stockbridge Community Church and it is online. And what we do is we have a morning prayer for the next 21 days. And it starts at 6:30 a.m. And during that time, we do communion, prayer, a worship song. And then we have miracles that we're praying for within our church. And we definitely want to encourage everybody to pray for their miracles that they're waiting to see happen in 2026. So again, that's going to be 21 days of prayer, and I will make sure to add the link this time when I repost the show. So with that, we're going to get started with our Kids Corner.
Colin dreamed of owning the biggest farm. He'd run through the fields shouting his goals to everyone, but his father always said, "It's not about owning land, Colin. It's about caring for it." Colin was too busy dreaming to understand. As he grew, Colin planted fast-growing crops to expand quickly. At first it worked, but soon the soil became dry and his fields were barren. Frustrated, Colin realized his quick success wasn't lasting. One evening his father told him, "Son, true progress takes time." The next day, Colin started over. He cared for the soil, planted trees, and worked patiently. Slowly, his farm came back to life. Years later, Colin stood proudly in his flourishing fields. He told the village kids, "Dreams don't grow overnight. Build your future with patience and care." Colin's journey proved that success isn't about speed. It's about building something strong and lasting. True success lies not in the speed of achieving goals, but in the strength of the foundation you build for the future. This simple yet powerful story featuring Colin can inspire your viewers to value patience and hard work over quick gains.
Yeah, patience and hard work, because a lot of times it's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to see the results till way later, right? But it doesn't mean that you cannot plant the seeds so they will grow. And Grand Rising to you, Patty Cakes, and she says the boys enjoy Kids Corner. I'm glad because they were actually my inspiration for it. I had no idea that little people were listening to the broadcast, but I thought about it, I was like, yeah, there are people out there that are parents, and I want to make sure that I'm being respectful to the ears, because say things are rated G, rated grandma, for my grandmother, and she is definitely a God-fearing woman, and I want to make sure that I'm respectful to her ears. And also just how I bring the news to you guys in a way that anybody can really get something out of it. So, you know, amen. I'm glad the boys are enjoying Kids Corner. And with that, we're going to get into honoring God with our bodies. So, God, please protect and guard our thoughts. God, help me to fix my thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. So I will think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. God, please help me listen for your voice. Protect my ears. God, help me to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. God, please protect my eyes from sin's damage. Oh, excuse me. God, I make a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully. God, please protect my mouth and help me to speak life. God, set a guard over my mouth. Lord, keep watch over the doors of my lips. God, please help my hands to serve generously. God, help me to do good to everyone and especially to those who belong to our family in the faith. God, please protect my reproductive organs. God, please help me to honor you with my body. And God, please protect my feet as I walk along your path. God, let your word be a lamp for my feet and a light on my path. So just getting our mind set right for the morning to honor God with our bodies, right? To really give him the first, right? You talk about tithing and different things like that, but also just giving the first fruits, right? And some of the first fruits can be us with God. Just freezing up or kind of glitching this morning. I don't know what's going on with my internet. I had to restart my computer. That's why I started a little bit late this morning. So I'm just hoping that at some juncture, internet will kick in and act right. But I'm going to keep on and continue on. So hopefully the rebroadcast, everything will be synced up and going in a good, solid direction. So later, but she'll be joining us at 8 o'clock. So I'm very excited for that for Women in Wellness Wednesday. And as I was in another meeting yesterday, someone asked me about the Monroe Doctrine. Now, I really didn't have a wide background on it. I've heard of it, but I really didn't study it out. So I was like, okay, let me study this out and let me look into this and share this with our audience because you're going to be hearing about it a lot, especially in relation to what just happened. Talk about the Monroe Doctrine. So I found a video on it that gives a brief explanation. Of course, I did some research in Grok to
Cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy. It is steeped in ideas of dismantling colonialism and shifting global power dynamics in the 19th century. Its origins are simultaneously simple and complex. Let's start by meeting James Monroe, United States. He fought and was wounded in the American Revolution, served in state and federal government, and held several diplomatic posts. Through it all, he believed firmly in the American experiment. And a doctrine is a principle or
I am so sorry. It kicked me out. Kicked me out of my own platform. I really, I don't know. Um, I'm really thinking about using a different platform outside of StreamYard because StreamYard has just not been great. I don't know what's going on. They have been bought out by somebody else. I know my internet works in my house. So it's one of those things that I know. That I know. It's not just me. My internet works fairly well. It's not perfect, like everything isn't, but it does for the most part, it works, right? Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to try to upload that video one more time since my room crashed.
Is an early cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy. It is steeped in ideas of dismantling colonialism and shifting global power dynamics in the 19th century. Its origins are simultaneously simple and complex. Let's start by meeting James Monroe. Before he became the 5th president of the United States, he fought and was wounded in the American Revolution, served in state and federal government, and held several diplomatic posts. Through it all, he believed firmly in the American experiment. And a doctrine is a principle or idea that influences a government's actions. Doctrines can become part of a country's foreign policy. The Monroe Doctrine began as part of an elaborate speech Monroe gave in 1823. So how did he get there? In 1812, the United States fought and won the Second War against the British. This win showed powerful European nations that America could defend and maintain its independence. But American independence was also tied to addressing the political volatility in its neighborhood. South of the United States, colonies in Latin America were fighting and winning their own independence from the Spanish Empire. Between 1821 and 1822 alone, 10 former colonies forged new nations. The United States couldn't afford to take a wait-and-see attitude. Could these new Latin American countries keep Europeans from recolonizing them? Somebody had to say something. But would anything the U.S. president had to say really make a difference? It's tricky. Monroe recognized the need to support Latin American independence, but at this point, the United States was not a global superpower. Its economy and military were no match for the Europeans. Enter the greatest naval power in the world, Great Britain. Great Britain wanted to trade with the new Latin American nations and was also keeping an eye on the competition from mainland Europe. They knew firsthand that empires are expensive to maintain. The British were not interested in any recolonization schemes, but they worried about others and even offered to make a joint statement with the Americans, warning Europeans to stay away from the Western Hemisphere. Monroe and his advisors knew that Great Britain would provide the naval might to back up a statement. The offer to issue a joint statement was very tempting. But would a joint statement make the United States look weak? Some of Monroe's advisors did not think so. They argued that teaming up with the British was how the United States could be taken seriously by the other European powers. But Secretary of State John Quincy Adams disagreed. Like Monroe, he remembered America's hard-fought victories against the British. Adams told the president that riding on the coattails of the British was no way to establish dominance in its own neighborhood. Adams also saw this as an opportunity to reaffirm America's strong, independent foreign policy. Wise leaders consider all points of view before making a decision. Ultimately, Monroe agreed with his Secretary of State. In a speech to Congress on December 2, 1823, he made the United States' position clear. Monroe declared the Western Hemisphere closed to future colonization. He also reminded the Europeans that any interference in the Americas would be considered a hostile act against the United States. In effect, this bound the security and economic interests of the United States with that of the new Latin American nations. But what Monroe did not say in his speech was just as important. He did not lay out a plan of action should the Europeans ignore the warning, because when in reality, there wouldn't be much the United States could do. However, the presence of American diplomats throughout Latin America did help forge new alliances. Diplomats built relationships with Latin Americans and provided valuable intelligence back to Washington regarding European ambitions in the region. As it turns out, while both the United States and European nations did eventually interfere in the affairs of independent Latin American nations, it would be America that cast its imperial arm over the Western Hemisphere at the dawn of the 20th century. Though there was one significant difference from Monroe's time. There would be no question the United States could now back up its words with military and commercial might.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's very interesting because it's a doctrine. It's not necessarily law. It's pretty much how they carried out that enforcement. I'll call it that. It was enforcement, right? Europe, you're not going to come over here, and we are going to build relationships with those that are on our hemisphere, right? So, yeah, like I said, I find it fascinating that this is being brought up because, again, a doctrine is pretty much, it's not legislation, it's how they used our Constitution, it's how they used our laws to pretty much carry out building relationships and, saying, okay, we're not going to have colonization coming over from Europe to South America. I guess it's one of those things, if anybody colonizes it, it will be us, which is crazy. But that's what they did. But the Europe, South America's pretty much been autonomous. I think my only issue, and maybe a few other people's issue, is within the past 5 years, how our borders were not respected, and how the past administration and both parties, right, how they allowed mass immigration to, pretty much, and they're still trying to do it, destroy our economy, right? It's wreaked havoc on us. And we still have different governors giving out what $30,000 vouchers for people that are here illegally so they can buy a home. Yeah, I ain't even gotten to that video. I saw it. I'm not gonna play it for you guys, but I saw it yesterday and I was like, whoa, that is intense. What if every American citizen was given a hand up so they could get a home, so they could pay off their debt, like whatever they needed to do. But we're doing this for people who are completely unvetted, who are not American citizens. And we're doing this, whoa, with federal tax dollars? Hmm. Yeah. Again, the Monroe Doctrine, it's very interesting, but it is not a law. It is just more so, and this is just my opinion, it is a playbook that can be used in certain situations. And in this situation, Trump decided to use it in regards to Venezuela and the current conflict that we're in right now. And a lot of people, we're at war. We are not at war. It's a conflict. Okay. And it's not really even a conflict. It's more so, they're looking at, and it's not regime change either. It's just like none of these things. They're trying to hold somebody accountable who, was involved in a lot of drug activity that we're trying to shut down, and some other nefarious things going on. But you're using this doctrine to try to protect the United States. Okay, we'll see how this all plays out. But going back to the war part of it, people keep saying, we're at war, we're at war. Our federal government's been at war with the American people for a long time. You have to remember, war is not necessarily with guns and tanks. War is somebody impeding your ability to communicate, how you move, your transportation, and your communication. Move, protection, communication. If all of those things are being impeded simultaneously, you are at war. We are at war, but it's with words, policy, and how people are moving right now. So we need to pay close attention to who is doing what. Now, I'm going to bring up another video of a gentleman and his perspective on the conflict in Venezuela in regards to the Monroe Doctrine.
Zion here, coming to you from Colorado. Today we're talking about Venezuela, and for those of you who have been under a rock for the last few days, the United States military launched a strike with special forces into Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, and captured Nicolas Maduro, the president, brought him to New York for processing to face charges of drug trafficking, terrorism, conspiracy, lots of fun things. He'll never see the light of day again. So, what is going on? Why is the United States doing this, and what is next? Let me start by saying that we're not going to discuss what the Trump administration is saying, because the Trump administration is being wildly inconsistent with its statements. It's not that what they're saying is irrelevant. I'm sure one of the things that they're saying is actually going to be what they're going to do, but they've said that they're going to go to war with other countries, and they're not going to go to war with other countries. They should be trusted, or they should be feared. That they're going after Greenland, that they're going to go after Brazil. Some of these may be true, some of them are definitely not. I'm going to leave that to the side and just talk about the broad geopolitics of this and the economics. So, step one, why did this happen? There's a big picture and a little picture. The big picture is something called the Monroe Doctrine that dates back to President Monroe in the 1800s, when the United States took the formal position that the Western Hemisphere was its sphere of influence, and other countries from the Eastern Hemisphere were not welcome. Originally, the United States did not have the economic and especially the military capacity to enforce that, but as the decades went on and the U.S. got stronger, especially after the Civil War, things changed, and by the time you got to Roosevelt in the early 20th century, the United States had adopted a change to Monroe where it was actively intervening throughout the length and breadth of Latin America to prevent other countries from the Eastern Hemisphere from even having the option. Eventually, we get to World War II, and with the end of World War II, Monroe was kind of quietly abandoned, not because the United States didn't believe in it, but because all of a sudden the entire world was the Western Hemisphere. In the aftermath of World War II, all of the world's navies had sunk for the American one, and the United States was putting together a guns for better deal with all of the allies that would allow the United States to militarily control the entire globe. And so what we used to do just in Latin America was expanded to a degree to the Eastern Hemisphere as well. But now that the Cold War is over, and now that the United States is backing away from the world writ large, it's returning home to a certain degree. And if China and Russia and the rest are no longer top-tier issues for Washington, then all of a sudden places like Caracas look a little bit more interesting and naturally rise up the scale. So this was always going to happen. Some version of this, some version of U.S. re-engagement with the Western Hemisphere. The details matter, but the U.S. was always going to take a bolder position in the Western Hemisphere in the decades to come. That's the big picture. The smaller picture with Venezuela. Venezuela used to be a pretty tight U.S. ally and a fairly successful country. It nationalized its oil back in the 1970s and then partnered with Western multinationals, mostly American, but some European, to develop crude that was a little bit more technically involved, and eventually, by the time we get to the mid-1990s, became a major producer with over 3 million barrels per day of output. Then there was an election that brought a very Trump-like character by the name of Hugo Chavez to power, and he basically took the natural riches and the sunk investment and used them to push his own personal cult and his personal ideological project, and began a 25-year process of driving the country into the ground. He died back in the early 2010s, and he was succeeded by a guy named Nicolas Maduro. He's the guy who's now in prison, who was literally his bus driver. Chavez chose his people not because they were competent at economic or military management, but because they were good at keeping the population under control while he looted the country. And Maduro learned everything that he knows at the feet of Chavez and basically doubled down on the oppression/looting. So Venezuela used to have a good infrastructure. It used to have the most sophisticated energy sector outside of a Western country. It used to have an excellent educational system. But over the last 30 years, all of that has gone to pot. We even had a situation a few years ago where food production collapsed so massively that we had a horrible famine. They've bounced back from that a little bit, but that's largely because of the U.S. supermajor Chevron, which still has a few operations in the country that has generated enough capital that's allowed the country to import the 80% of the food that it now needs. It used to be a food exporter. Okay, that's the big picture and the small picture.
Yeah. So I liked his take on it because it pretty much summarized what the other video laid out. The other video laid out historically, right, what the Monroe Doctrine is, but he was able to piggyback from that and just kind of give us a broader picture of where we're at now with the Monroe Doctrine. It's really interesting. And Beyond Skeptical says he fails to mention Chavez and Maduro were socialist, right? Maduro even promoted Bernie Sanders. Yeah, because I was like, and I think when he was referring to, and this is just my opinion, a Trump-like character, different, right? Like Trump is different. Trump isn't a socialist. He's definitely a capitalist, but he's not your typical politician. And I think that's what intrigued people probably about Hugo Chavez. But beyond that, Hugo Chavez, he was not a really top-notch person either. He's a little bit of a bully. It's things going on. I'm just saying, Venezuela had been overtaken a little bit. Again, to be on Skeptical's point, they were socialists. And you see what socialism does. And people don't talk about Brazil, but they're in the same place. Brazil had all kind of natural resources, doing good, doing wonderful, and then socialism got them too. And that, it took their country out. I mean, and people are trying to build out of socialism. So we have to understand that socialism doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Pray for New York, please. And the Democrats, it's interesting because they're now switching and saying, we're democratic socialists. I'm like, this is not smart. This is not smart. You cannot continually and habitually tax people and think that you're going to tax your way into freedom. That's not how this works. Freedom is what it is. You need to take off the regulations. You need to actually tax people less so they can put more money into the economy so that you are more prosperous. But on top of that, there's a lot of fraud going on everywhere, right? And the federal funding, in my opinion, needs to stop immediately. If you are a organization that relies on federal funding, it needs to be stopped until we can find out where the fraud is, where it is massively, so that tax dollars are not continually being wasted, because there are people that do need those resources. The second thing that needs to be done is everybody that's here from other countries that are sitting up here on welfare, they need to be removed off the dole and returned to their country because they're not helping us here. Because I know somebody, I was listening to a space last year, and they were saying, if we remove too many people that are working, right, even if they're here illegally, it might put our economic structure in a bad place, right? And I get it. It's like, okay, do we have that 1-for-1 ratio? If somebody is removed from the country, do we have somebody here in America that can immediately take that person's place? Because you're going to need that for your infrastructure. What I'm talking about is people that aren't working at all, but they're just being given money and resources. Those people need to be deported immediately and not ever be able to return. Unless you have a job, you cannot have any benefits. Not medical, not welfare, SNAP, nothing, housing, nothing. Y'all need to go, because our government has proven to us they can house who they want. They can fund who they want. They've shown us, period. They've even shown us they can continue fraud for decades. And no one bats an eye. It's time for some arrests. It's time for some people to be dog walked. I don't know if y'all are with me out there, but I'm ready. I'm ready for perp walks. I'm ready for the whole thing, because it's time. It's time. We have, as Americans, we've just been taken advantage of. And I'm sure people are just sitting back laughing and teeing, like, oh yeah, we got over on them, and we did. Look, this is not going to go well for you, for anybody. Because, the people that I'm mentioning that are just here on welfare, they're still being abused. There's still other nefarious things going on, even with them. This has got to be cleaned up. And we have to continue to demand it. As the American public, no, we are not going to let our foot off the gas, and we are not going to take our boot off of your neck. Federal government, state governments, local municipalities, we are coming after all of you. If you are not going to do your job and we find out that there is fraud, you're going to prison. And that's it. That's it. We're going to have a whole bunch of people in jail, a whole bunch of people out of work. Because, see, it's not enough for these people to say, oh, I'm not running for reelection or, being removed from Congress. No, there needs to be some jail time. There needs to be some prison sentences, period. And for those that are in our Congress that have committed crimes, they need to lose all of their benefits. I actually got a very interesting text message from someone on Facebook. And I don't want to say I typically don't mess with things that are almost like chain messages, but this one was a little bit different. And what it is, it's a proposal for the 28th Amendment. And I found it really interesting. And it was saying that, just parts of it. It says, members of Congress have exempted themselves. It's just kind of setting up what the 28th Amendment would be based on. But it said members of Congress have exempted themselves from many of the laws they have passed under which ordinary citizens must live. For example, they are exempt from any fear of prosecution for sexual harassment. And as the latest example, they have exempted themselves from healthcare reform in all its aspects. Okay. They also, members of Congress can retire at full pay after only one term. Children of Congress members do not have to pay back their college student loans. Staffers of Congress family members are also exempt from having to pay back student loans. So there's millions of dollars taken out by members of Congress and their family members and their staffers, and they do not have to pay it back. Wow, must be nice. Must be nice. And then it goes on into what they would like to see with this 28th Amendment. So governors of 35 states have filed suit against the federal government for imposing unlawful burdens upon their states. It only takes 38 of the 50 states to convene a constitutional convention. Each person, it talks about, receiving it. So the proposed 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Congress shall make no law that applies to citizens of the United States that does not apply equally to the senators and or representatives, and Congress shall make no law that applies to senators and or representatives that does not apply equally to the citizens of the United States. So we keep going on. The Congressional Reform Act, I guess there's the Congressional Reform Act of 2017. So no tenure, no pension. A congressman or woman collects a salary while in office and receives no pay when they're out of office, and no more perks go with them. I'm okay with that. For Congress, past, present, and future, participates in Social Security. All funds in the Congressional Retirement Fund move to the Social Security system immediately. All future funds flow into the Social Security system, and Congress participates with the American people. It may not be used for any other purpose. Because I think right now, Congress, they're able to get whatever their pension is, plus they get their Social Security. Yeah, it's crazy. So Congress must purchase their own retirement plan, just as all Americans do. Congress will no longer vote themselves a pay raise. Congressional pay will rise by the lower of CPI or 3%. Congress loses their current healthcare system and participates in the same healthcare system as the American people. Congress must equally abide by all laws they impose on the American people. No more insider trading. All contracts with past and present congressmen and women are void. The American people did not make this contract with congressmen and women. Congress made all these contracts by and for themselves. Serving in Congress is an honor and a privilege, not a career. The founding fathers envisioned citizen legislatures should serve their terms, then go home and go back to work, not get all kinds of freebies. Yeah. So I really like this. I'm gonna, see if there's a link to it that I can put in the chat, when I repost this. But when I read that, I was like, yeah, we need that. Because I think, I was talking about this yesterday with some individuals. What about the term limits? We've got people literally that die in Congress because there's no term limits for them. Now, our votes should be their term limits, but you got to ask yourself, how are these people staying in office when no one likes them? Who's voting for them? Somebody's voting for them. Somebody's voting for this. Somebody is keeping them in office because they're getting their needs met. And right now, we've got people here illegally that shouldn't be allowed to vote anyway, but they're being allowed to vote because they're getting driver's licenses, they're getting identification that does not separate them from US citizens. And then we have states that have no ID requirements at all. You can just show up and vote. What kind of stuff is that? Yeah, just a lot of illegitimate things. And again, these are things that unfortunately, as the American public, we've allowed. And we need to say no more to all of it. Literally to all of it. Now, I wanted to go into the Monroe Doctrine a little bit more. Let me make it a little bit bigger screen. Sorry, guys. Yeah, my computer, just kicked me out the whole room. I was like, what? So it is definitely sharing what was in the video, that it was established by President James Monroe during his annual message to Congress, December 2nd, 1823. It asserted that the Western Hemisphere was no longer open to European colonization or political influence, and that any such attempts by European powers would be viewed as acts of aggression requiring U.S. intervention. At its core, it aimed to protect newly independent Latin republics from reconquest by Spain or other colonial powers, while also signaling U.S. opposition to the extension of European monarchies into the Americas. The doctrine was largely symbolic at the time, as the young U.S. lacked the military might to enforce it independently, and it relied partly on British naval power for backing. Over time, it evolved into a justification for U.S. dominance in the region, including interventions like Roosevelt Colliery of 1904, which expanded it to allow U.S. military action to stabilize Latin American countries and prevent European involvement. So I do find it interesting with this, and just reading through it, it's like, okay, wow. So yeah, political influence and interference, and that any such attempt by European powers would be viewed as acts of aggression requiring the U.S. intervention. So I can see where Trump's trying to justify this with Russia and China, right? Saying we got to protect Venezuela. But if you've seen any of the past interviews he's had, he has focused on the oil. He has focused on the resource. He is focused, like, dead set, because, and I kind of get it. It's like, well, if you leave Venezuela open the way it was open, don't think China wouldn't try to, dominate in there, or Russia. But now they've got to deal with Trump. But here's the other thing. They're not going to be dealing with Trump forever. So whoever the next president is, you take notes because you're going to have a lot of work to deal with behind this administration and how they are moving. Now, military security adjustments, the strategy outlines a readjustment of U.S. military presence in the hemisphere to tackle urgent threats, such as designating drug cartels as terrorist organizations and conducting operations against them. This has manifested in actions like large-scale naval deployments in the Caribbean in 2025 and targeted strikes on alleged drug boats, described by analysts as a return to gunboat diplomacy. A notable escalation occurred in early January 26 with U.S. military strikes in Venezuela, including the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, which Trump publicly framed as an application of the Monroe Doctrine. So from Monroe to Monroe, a portmanteau of Donald to Monroe to assert unchallenged U.S. dominance, economic and diplomatic focus, broader implications, right? Critics argue this Monroe Doctrine 2.0 revives interventionist logic, risk alienating Latin American nations, many of which resent the doctrine's historical associations with U.S. imperialism, and could strain relations with Europe by questioning its viability as an ally amid warnings of civilization erasure. Supporters, including the administration, portray it as a pragmatic defense of U.S. sovereignty and interest, with Trump himself making the doctrine's anniversary in December 2025 by declaring it alive and well under his coloring. Now, what I find interesting about most of it and all of it is it's weird. It's like, how do we get here? It's like, how do we get here? You know, when I see the words, colonizing, these different euphemisms, it's like, what are we really trying to accomplish? Because I definitely don't want to ever see the erasure of another civilization. But at the same time, there are people there from these Latin American countries here in the United States being given resources. Why? What is happening? Because the faucet has not turned off with that. It's still humming. The faucet's still humming. And Beyond Skeptical says, I believe Trump's interest in oil is both driven by Chavez's seizure of U.S. infrastructure and investments, reparations in a way, along with thwarting international concentration in the region. Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that him using this as a way to say, okay, right? Okay, we've kind of played this game with you a lot. But, when it comes to the drug thing, it's still a matter of somebody has placed the order on American soil for these drugs. Who are these people? And why aren't we focusing on getting them off the soil? If it's really about the drugs, if it's really about protecting America in that way, why are the orders still being made? Why are the drugs still coming to America? Because somebody has placed the order, okay, for this. Somebody wants the drugs. Somebody has placed the order, and we need to find out who that is and why they're placing the orders and who's filling the orders and stop them from doing it. Because now that, Maduro is in jail, are the drugs still being transported? Bueller? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is going on? what's really happening in that respect. So with that, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to check on my guests to make sure that they have what they need to join us here this morning. But thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, and we will see you on the other side.
A life empowered is closer than you think. We're all looking for a better way. Reimagine what's next with a new sense of exuberance. Why not power on like you mean it? Or power off blissfully? A better sleep is a better awake. You've never moved like this before. With the energy nature intended. Imagine reprogramming the way you look at the speed of science. At longevity. At exhilaration. It's next level rejuvenation. Take your well-being from the inside out and outside in. The light within is ready to ignite. Be the light. LifeWave.
We are back. Thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Eastern. My name is Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and I will be your host. I'm just waiting for our guest to appear with us this morning because I just thought about this. Not that it's funny, but she's in Illinois, and Illinois is an hour behind us. So for her, right, she's thinking, so it will be 9:30 my time, or 9 my time, 8 her time. So she may be joining us closer to the 9 o'clock. I just thought about that. I was like, time differences, but that's okay. We're going to continue on. And there were some other articles and just things that I looked up that I wanted to share with you guys. And so, just to finish up with the conflict, in Venezuela, I was, listening to different podcasts, and some people had mentioned, like, what about, the connections with Vanguard and BlackRock, the World Economic Forum, maybe even the United Nations. I mean, it's a lot of stuff going on. So, so it went kind of summarize what I was talking about. So the connection between the entities and conflict. So the connections are primary economic and geopolitical, rooted in historical U.S. interests in Venezuela's resources, right? The world's largest proven oil reserves at over 300 billion barrels, and efforts to counter leftist governments, right? So Vanguard and BlackRock, as massive asset managers, have indirect ties through investments in energy sectors and Venezuelan debt. Now, the WEF and UN are more peripheral roles focused on global discussions and diplomatic responses. So with Vanguard and BlackRock, these firms are among the largest institutional investors globally, managing trillions in assets, including stakes in U.S. energy companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips, which have long-standing claims and operations in Venezuela. They are always somewhere, right? You say Vanguard, BlackRock, and they are somewhere. So BlackRock in particular has held Venezuelan bonds via ETFs and direct exposure and suffered losses from defaults under Maduro, part of a broader $150 billion debt crisis. Following U.S. Operation BlackRock's Investment Institute published an analysis viewing the event as underscoring geopolitical fragmentation, but with limited transmission to global markets. Due to Venezuela's small oil output share, about 1%, they maintain a risk-on stance, overweighting U.S. equities driven by AI themes and emerging market bonds, anticipating minimal commodity disruptions, but potential longer-term oil price declines if production stabilizes. So Vanguard's 2026 economic outlook focuses on U.S. growth projected at 2.25%, supported by AI and fiscal policies, but doesn't directly address Venezuela. However, like BlackRock, it holds distressed Venezuelan assets and could benefit from U.S.-friendly transition, enabling debt recovery or new investments. Public disclosure on X suggests these firms see the intervention as a corporate heist for oil and minerals, with estimates of 500 to 750 billion in opportunities over 5 years in energy, infrastructure, and mining. Historically, both have lobbied against sanctions relief to pressure asset sales. So yeah, a lot of people's hands are going to be in the cookie jar. So it's interesting. But yeah, Vanguard and BlackRock are going to be there. Now with the World Economic Forum, concessions are tenuous and not directly tied to the 2026 intervention. The WEF discussions on Venezuela date back to 2019, focusing on the humanitarian crisis. Opposition figures like Juan Guaido, whom the U.S. once recognized as interim president, and potential U.S. military involvement. The WEF's broader agenda on global economic stability and energy transitions has touched on Latin American resources conflicts, including Venezuela's oil amid sanctions. No recent WEF statements link it explicitly to the U.S. action, but CEO Larry Fink of BlackRock, a WEF participant and CFR member, has influenced global financial narratives that align with U.S. interests in resource access. Some ex-post frame WEF as part of a global elite network indirectly benefiting from regime changes for capitalist expansion. So again, the reason why I was listening to a lot of news, and I wanted to bring this all to you guys, because it's like you're going to hear these different narratives out there: BlackRock, Vanguard, WEF, United Nations. And I just really wanted to see, well, how are they tying in to what's going on now? As far as the WEF goes, you know, their whole thing, and I don't know if people remember the video during the pandemic, as they call it, where they made the videos, you'll be happy and own nothing, right? And just all this dystopian type propaganda, really, is what it was, coming out from the WEF. And it's like, wait a minute. Why is it when some resources are going any kind of way, you guys are always there, and BlackRock? Now, Larry Fink, yeah, he is working with Trump right now. So we have to keep an eye on what is going on. Now, the United Nations has been a key forum for opposition to the U.S. action. An Emergency Security Council meeting on January 5th, 2026 saw sharp divisions. Russia, China, Colombia, and others condemned the strikes as unilateral, illegal, and bullying. violating the UN's Charter Principles on Sovereignty and Non-Use of Force, Article 2.4. UN Security General Antonio Guterres expressed deep alarm, calling it a dangerous precedent where rules of international law have been disrespected. Now, and raised concerns about regional instability. Venezuela's prosecutor general labeled it terrorism, and even U.S. allies voiced objections. The UN has previously criticized U.S. sanctions as economic warfare, contributing to Venezuela's crisis. Critics like economist Jeffrey Sachs blasted it as a U.S. power grab at a UN meeting. The UN role highlights broader geopolitical rifts, with the U.S. defending the operation as self-defense against drug threats. Now, here's the thing. Yes, the UN is weird. You have no standing. You're not anybody to tell anybody what to do. The UN cracks me up because they're like, well, we just have to say, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't. You are basically an geopolitical investment club. And if anybody wants to participate in your nonsense, they can, but they don't have to. You have no say. You don't. You give people pretty much a place to talk about and align or realign their grievances or whatever, so that everybody has a safe place to talk. But you have a funding source, which I'm glad for. I'm glad that you don't. You don't need a funding source because nobody likes you. Because you come in and you destroy stuff and you don't build it back up, and then you want to do some humanitarian things, but at the same time you're destroying humanity. It's weird. It's interesting. I'm not a fan of the UN. I think years ago there were good intentions with really wanting to bring all of the world leaders and countries to one place to actually have civil discussions. But when ideologies took over, and it always will, when you're doing stuff like this, because you're really not focused on taking care of people, you are more focused on your ideologies, things fall apart. And then you're more focused on how you feel as opposed to what's best for people. Now, this whole conflict in Venezuela, it can go either way. My concern is, and I've said it yesterday, is a vacuum. What I don't want to see is another terrorist organization rise up out of what's going on. They already have Tren de Agua, which is a very dangerous gang in that region. So unless those people are going to be put in prison and arrested, unless we're going to do that part and shut it down so that people are safe in Venezuela, what have we done? What have we opened up? That's a bigger question. And it needs to be dealt with. And people want answers. But no, I'm not going to leave it up to a UN tirade because I'm just not. No. Now, these entities intersect through U.S.-led efforts to isolate Maduro, including sanctions since 2017, intensified under Trump, probably under his last administration, that paralyzed Venezuela's economy, blocked international credit, and seized assets like Citgo. This hybrid war has historical roots in U.S. interventions, the 2002 coup attempt against Chavez, often justified by oil interests encountering foreign influences. So this has been a point of contention for a while. But this time, Trump was actually successful. But again, what does this look like? If it's not regime change, okay, is there going to be another free and fair election for the people of Venezuela? And how much support are they going to need to build their country back? Right? Because right now, there's a vacuum. And every day that something isn't getting done in Venezuela, in my opinion, it's a vacuum. And what's going to happen next? Right? potential impact on the American economy. So the intervention is expected to have limited immediate negative effects, but could also yield positive outcomes for certain sectors, primarily energy and investments. Yeah, so for the short term, global markets showed resilience. The Dow hit records post operation with modest hedging into safe havens rather than panic. Oil prices may dip slightly long term if Venezuelan output increases under U.S. influence, but no major disruptions are anticipated since Venezuela accounts for only 1% of global oil. Energy ETFs rose as investors eye U.S. firms' access to reserves. Now, long term, a U.S. managed transition could open 1.7 trillion in business over 15 years, including oil, requiring $100 billion infrastructure investment, mining and agriculture. This might lower U.S. fuel prices, ease inflation, and boost energy companies like Chevron already operating there. However, uncertainty around political stability, which is what I was just saying, legal challenges, and international backlash from China, a major Venezuelan lender, could deter investments. Broader U.S. growth remains strong, 2.5% projected over 2026, supported by AI and fiscal policies, with the Venezuelan event seen as a regime shift, right, enabling new U.S. investment. Risk include mitigation spikes, regional tensions, or commodity violation if output doesn't recover quickly. So there are some concerns to be had with this, but I mean, oil prices are dropping. Russia and China, they're going to have to deal with Donald Trump. And husband and I were talking about this the other day. They were like, Russia and China, they had all these agreements with Venezuela. I was like, well, how do you know that there wasn't a backdoor discussion before all of this went down, that those agreements would be honored? Huh? We don't know. But based on what people are doing or not doing, it kind of says a lot about what could be happening potentially, right? We don't know. They could have definitely, like I said, they could already had this conversation and we would have no idea. You know how Trump likes to roll. He is not going to put all of his cards on the table, which I don't blame him and I respect it, right? I definitely have great respect for how he is handling communications with the American public, because do we need to know everything? No, we don't. There are some things that have to be negotiated behind closed doors. It is what it is. You may not like it, but it is what it is. And we have to look at, okay, on the other side of this, who benefits? And the thing about it is, when gas prices go down, the cost of food goes down. The cost of materials goes down. Even if the demand is still there, because once the transportation costs are lowered, it lowers everything else, so that there's a balance in the market. See, COVID, it did a real number on us, because they were telling people to destroy crops. They were telling people you can't deliver food certain places, and it wreaked havoc on us. There were businesses that shut down underneath that, but in all of it, energy prices went up, and it drove up the price of everything because you had more demand and less supply. And again, on top of that, energy costs more. So people weren't able to afford things. But then we had mass immigration or you have people coming over here and you immediately put them on welfare so they can afford everything. Like, it's a mess that has to be untamed. Just a mess. So I wanted to look at this article. The White House launches a January 6th website defending Trump and criticizing Democrats. Now, this is in regards to January 6th. So the White House on Tuesday launched a website marking the 5th anniversary of the Capitol riot on January 6, 2021. It praised President Donald Trump's actions surrounding the event and sharply criticized Democrats. So here are the details. The website argues Democrats reversed reality after January 6th, portraying Trump supporters as insurrectionists, and frames Trump's post-inauguration pardons and communications for many January 6th defendants as correcting a historic wrong. It claims the 2020 election was fraudulent, fraud-ridden, accuses the House January 6th Select Committee of misconduct, and alleges Capitol Police escalated what is described as a peaceful protest. The page also criticizes former Vice President Mike Pence for certifying the 2020 election results, calling his actions an act of cowardice and sabotage, and states no law enforcement officers died as a result of the riot. Now, for context, following Trump's repeated claims the 2020 election was stolen, Trump supporters reached the Capitol on January 6, 2021, during the certification of former President Joe Biden's victory. Roughly 140 police officers were injured during the riot, and extensive damage was caused to the Capitol. According to Wikipedia reports, 5 people died either during the riot or in its immediate aftermath. One was shot by Capitol Police, another died of a drug overdose, and 3 died of natural causes, including a police officer who died of a stroke a day after. The House Select Committee later referred Trump for prosecution, though he was not convicted. Now, here's how the media covered it. Fox News, which is right biased, focused on the White House's claims that Democrats were promoting a gaslighting narrative to silence their political opponents. It wrote the new website works to shed accurate light on the event and highlighted former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's role during investigations. Washington Post, which leans left, described the riot as violent and said the website underscored Trump's years-long effort to reshape the narrative. It quoted former special counsel Jack Smith saying, "The president bears the bulk of the blame for instigating the attack, which caused the worst desecration of the complex since British forces burned in 1814. Now, CNN, that leans left, and Reuters Center both said balance of power in Washington, D.C. Both said Trump has whitewashed January 6th and platformed baseless and completely false claims. Reuters wrote the contrasting events laid bare the balance of power in Washington, D.C., while Fox News highlighted claims of cherry-picked information during January 6 investigations. CNN highlighted claims of cherry-picked information on the website. And at the end of all this rainbow, I need people to understand that the January 6th committee, they were granted pardons by the Biden administration. If there was nothing to see here, if there was nothing wrong, why would you have to pardon anybody on the committee? Yeah, that sums this whole thing up. If there was no wrongdoing, why are you being given pardons? Yeah, there's that. And good morning, Sincerely Lawless. Thank you so much for reposting the stream and joining us this morning. And good morning to you as well. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see, that they are, you know, 10 toes down, rehashing that. Like, okay, we're going to talk about all of this. All right. Whatever makes you happy at this point. Mainly because not that I'm overly concerned about January 6th. But at the same time, it was something that happened in our country that completely divided our country. There were people that went to jail that, in essence were innocent, but they still got put to jail. If you were escorted in and you were told, hey, sure, you can come into the Capitol, but then you didn't realize that everything outside turned into a riot after you were allowed to go in. Were you really an insurrectionist? Right? Videos don't lie. And why were there people changing their clothes and looking like they were in riot gear on the inside? Again, videos don't lie. So, will this be relitigated again? I think this is part of that website to relitigate it in the court of public opinion. And so people have already drawn their line in the sand on January 6th. There are people that believe that the election was stolen. There are people that believe that it didn't. There are people that are like, we had an insurrection in our nation capital. And there's people that are like, no, we didn't. I hope we never see anything like that again. And I really do hope and pray that we can get to a point in this country where we can have, civil discussions and that we can honorably disagree with one another if we have disagreements, as opposed to drawing a line in the sand so far and deep that families stop communicating with one another because of their political views. That's where we should never be. We should never be there, but unfortunately, we are there because people will just assume that you have a certain view. If you say things a certain way, they just tune you out. And it's prejudice because you are completely prejudging people of what you think they might say or do. If they say, yeah, I agree with Trump on these things, it's like, oh, I can't talk to you ever again. It's like, what is wrong with you? People need to learn how to have civil discourse. Maybe a class, but they need to learn how to have that. And with that, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to get into some more news with all sides. So thank you again for joining me here on Unfiltered Vision News. And we will see you on the other side.
At All Sides, we believe we give bias ratings for hundreds of media outlets. By freeing people from filter bubbles and providing different perspectives, we can all be better equipped to understand the world and each other. So how do we do it?
We're back. Thank you so much for joining me here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered, Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. My name is Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and I will be your host. And as you can see, Tim Walz, the Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, he drops the election bid. Now, had a conversation with some individuals yesterday. What we didn't realize is that there are some states where a governor can run consecutive terms, and there's no term limit. I didn't know that because growing up in California, we had Governor Brown, and his father was also governor. Interesting. But he ran, but he was only allowed to serve 2 terms. Then he had to take 2 terms off, and then he could run again. right? So you can be governor for 8 years, but you have to take 8 years off, and then you can be governor again for 8 years. So he holds that record in California. Not a bad governor. He was a fair governor. But Tim Walz, the state of Minnesota, apparently, you guys, they can run with no term limits. I did not know that. I was like, what? So currently there are 14 states that do not impose term limits on their governors, though New Hampshire and Vermont have 2-year terms, while the others have 4-year terms. So depending on the state that you're in, right? And now I had a broader question. So my question was, can you outline the states that do not have term limits for governors? And if those states are on the list of states that have refused to give information to the USDA, because you got to remember there's something going on right now with USDA and SNAP data. So the USDA was like, okay, we got all this fraud out there. We need to wet out the fraud. We need states to turn over their data so we can make sure that we have accurate data. Like we're not sending money to dead people or people that should not be receiving these funds, because guess what? People that are here illegally, they're not supposed to be getting SNAP benefits, right? That's what we kept being told, right? That they're not getting health care. They're not getting SNAP benefits. They're not getting financial assistance. What are you talking about? You guys are crazy. It's because they are. They're getting all these benefits. But we kept being lied to and told that they were not getting them. So we're just isolating this to just SNAP data. So where you see a yes, they refused to send the data. And where you say no, they sent their data. But again, these states, they do not have term limits for their governors. So Connecticut, Idaho, Illinois, I had no idea you could just be governor forever in Illinois. No wonder J.B. Pritzker is like, no one can touch me. I'm untouchable. If y'all don't vote that man out of office, look, it's on you. But they are refusing to send USDA data. Interesting, because a lot of the states that you see that are refusing to do this, their governors are basically sanctuary state governors. They have said, we have the illegals, we're going to keep them, but they keep raising taxes on the people. So I don't know how affordable it's going to be for people who live there. Now, Massachusetts, they refuse. Minnesota, Mr. Walz, and he had to step down. He had to. Yeah. I think somebody had to, again, tap him on the shoulder and say, man, sir, you need to step down. But they need to revoke his passport so he can't leave the country. I'm just saying. We don't need to pay money to get him extradited and sent back here. He needs to sit down somewhere. He needs to be on house arrest. We need all of the answers. And we need all of the emails. Don't destroy any information because the judge will make you get it back. Freeze everything because tribunals need to begin. Just saying. New Hampshire, they did not refuse. They're sending their information. New York didn't realize it. Somebody can be governor forever. And yes, they have refused to send their information to the USDA. North Dakota is sending their information. Texas is sending theirs. Utah is sending theirs. Vermont is sending theirs. But Washington, the state, they're not sending their information, nor is Wisconsin. It's very telling. But all 14 of these states have it so where you can be governor forever, as long as people keep voting you in. It's very fascinating and interesting. So the cross-reference based on the 21 states plus the District of Columbia that sued the USDA in late 2025 over its demand for detailed personal data on SNAP food recipients, which they refused to provide due to privacy legal terms. These states were subject to threats of funding cuts, but a court injunction blocked penalties against them, which means a court has forced the USDA to continue to pay federal funding to states where there are known acts of fraud and they're giving money to people that are here illegally. Really? And nobody's being held accountable for this? Like, this is big, in my opinion. So I did ask for some details on the lawsuit. And so pretty much in 2025, the USDA under the Trump administration issued an unprecedented demand for states to share detailed personal data on millions of supplemental nutritional assistance program SNAP applications and receipts dating back to 2020. The requested data included names, social security numbers, dates of birth, addresses, benefit amounts, and in some cases, immigration status. Yeah, because they were telling us, no, immigrants aren't receiving these funds, but they are. The question is, if you've got states that are like, sure, USDA, here's our information, do what you need to do. Why are states refusing? If you've done nothing wrong, why are you refusing? Oh, now it's like, we have to protect people's data. Stop. Those are excuses. And for courts to interject into this is horrible because it's letting people know that they can get away with complete and utter criminal activity. It's disgusting. It is truly a disgrace. So USDA's rationale, the agency stated the data we needed to create a national database for verifying eligibility, rooting out fraud, and ensuring program integrity. Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins described it as necessary to protect taxpayers and preserve SNAP for eligible individuals. I'm okay with that. That should just be the standard. Now, here's the state's objections. A coalition of primarily Democratic-led states. Democrats, y'all got to get it together because we already know who you support. We already know about replacement migration and how you want this to play out against the American people. But thank you for solidifying it right here. There's not a Democrat that can tell me that they love America. You don't. You love what fraud you can get away with in America. And the Republicans, I'm not letting you off the hook on this either. I'm not. Because you got a Republican governor in Ohio not doing his job, got fraud going on everywhere and protecting it. Just a mess. Okay. So the states argued the demand violated federal privacy laws, which is probably a whole lot, including the Privacy Act and SNAP Act confidentiality provisions, exceeded USDA's statutory authority, failed to follow required public notice and comment procedures, and pose risk of misuse, particularly for immigration enforcement, as the administration was linking data across agencies, right? Running records through DHS SAVE system. Guess what? They need to talk to each other because if somebody is here illegally and they're getting Social Security, they're getting food stamps, they're getting EBT, which is, straight payment, they're getting medical, and you can say, okay, this person is here illegally, they're getting all these resources, here's their address, ICE, go get them because there's actually a deportation order for this person. What is wrong with that? I'm okay with that. But those are the people that you're protecting. And it's so blatant and it's so obvious right now. This is bad. This is bad. So key timeline and developments. So in May of 25, the USDA issues initial directive to states and third-party payment processors. Between May and June, advocacy groups filed the lawsuit challenging the demand. USDA temporarily pauses collection. In July of last year, the USDA sets a July 30th deadline for compliance, threatening to withhold federal administrative funding from non-compliant states, a coalition of 21 states plus the District of Columbia. Plus the District of Columbia. Okay. Files a major lawsuit in a U.S. District Court with the Northern District of California, led by California and New York Attorney Generals. Why are we not surprised? September to October 2025, a federal judge, Maxine Chesney, issues a preliminary injunction blocking USDA from penalizing the plaintiff states or collecting their data, ruling the states are likely to succeed on claims that the demand is unlawful and contrary to SNAP Act. I'm gonna have to look up SNAP Act. It's crazy. So late 2025, at least 27 to 29, mostly Republican in the United States, comply and share the data. So if they're complying, what's wrong? And it said mostly. So that means that there's some in there that are democratically run. It's crazy. USDA escalates threats, including potential withholding of SNAP benefits, not just administrative funds. As of early 2026, the lawsuit remains ongoing. The injunction protects the plaintiff states from penalties, but the Trump administration has continued to pressure non-compliant states with threats of funding cuts potentially affecting programs in 2026. And, I'm glad that they have stopped the funding for like the daycare centers and home health care centers. Like a lot of that money is stopped everywhere. And they need to stop it till they figure out where this fraud is coming from. So here are the 21 states that are that have sued and refused compliance are predominantly democratically led. Now, here's the thing, in my opinion, if you've got states that are complying and your argument is privacy and your argument is all these other things, then why are all 50 states non-compliant? It's because you're protecting somebody. You're doing something that you shouldn't be. That's the problem. And we all see it. And for a judge to say, well, maybe we're not sure, but we're going to put this injunction here, you should be disbarred and removed and put into prison. We are tired of, as the American people, of having our federal tax dollars going to fund fraudulent activity. We're done. You guys don't get it. I don't think they get it, you guys. I don't think they get it that we are in a republic. This is a republic. It's we the people. We've put you in office and we can remove you. And we can demand that you be put in jail. And I think that's what we need to start doing. I need somebody who's got a larger account than mine on X demand that any and all politicians from federal, state, local, they need to be put in prison if they are a part of any of this fraudulent activity within these 21 states. Let's read them off. Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Washington, Wisconsin, plus Kentucky in some filings in the District of Columbia. So these states argued that data sharing would erode trust in SNAP. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? Because the people that actually do apply that are Americans need it. But guess what? Their families that have been here legally, right? That have been paying taxes into the system. So why they pay the taxes? So that any of their family members need that assistance, it's there for them. It is not supposed to be there for somebody who just comes up through our borders illegally, by the way. And they say, okay, we're just going to give this to you. What? This is federal money, not state money, federal. Everybody on this list, let's go. I need prosecutions. I need indictments. It's too much. It's too much. All of the governors, people in the state house, right? State Senate, people at the local level, any mayors involved, any councilmen involved, they all need to be put in prison. And anybody else who's receiving these funds, if they are not U.S. citizens, they need to be deported because they're not working. They're just living off the dole, so they don't affect anything. Get out. And oh, yes, take your children with you that you think are U.S. citizens, and they're not. Because if you came over here on purpose just to have a baby, just to be attached to all of the resources, you need to get up off the soil. You're not in alignment with being an American citizen. We've got over 300 points of legal entry, and you chose to come here illegally. You chose it. You broke the law starting. There is a 1996 act that states that you're supposed to be here on your own, working on your own, and you've chosen not to. Not our fault, not our problem. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to continue to allow this. Now, the case highlights tensions over federal state program administration, privacy protections, and immigration. Sorry, a little light rings in the way. Immigration policy. So no final resolution has been reported as of January 2026. So the litigation is ongoing. But what I'm hoping happens in this litigation is that they can appeal or move the case to somebody who's an unbiased judge who can look at the case for itself, because on its face, it's fraudulent. Because if you already have other states in mass, and pretty much by a slim majority that have submitted their paperwork, no problem, because they're getting federal funding, and you have the slim majority or, smaller majority saying, no, we can't send it. Why not? Like for real, why not? Oh, because you want to protect your voting base? People that shouldn't even be able to vote anyway? Because their immigration status. You know they're here illegally. You know you shouldn't be giving them the federal funds. You know that you have committed pretty much fraud. You can't defraud the federal government like this. And continue to demand the money. Well, y'all bold. I mean, it is, whew. Yeah, y'all are something else. Really, really and truly. Now, I know there's a lot of news about Venezuela, tons of it. But this one I found interesting about Greenland. This is, why does Trump need Greenland? How could he get it? Is that what we're going to do this time around in the administration? Be like, you know what? I want, let's do Cuba. Let's fix Puerto Rico as well. Let's just get this done. Let's just clean up this mess while we're here. What is going on? So Donald Trump reignited his objective of acquiring Greenland for the U.S. on Sunday. What might the U.S. need the region for? And could Trump realize his vision? So Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place, right? Trump said of the self-governing Danish territory and NATO ally, we need Greenland from the standpoint of national security, and Denmark is not going to be able to do it. Yeah, the Danish, they're very sweet people. They really truly are. They're very wonderful people. So Greenland is not desirable real estate by any typical metric, but it has outsized strategic significance, wrote Rich Lowry, right bias for the New York Post. That means right. Lowry noted that the territory sits on a key naval corridor between the Atlantic and the Arctic. So Greenland's location northeast of Canada and between the US, Europe, and Russia is strategic for both economic and defense purposes, especially as melting sea ice has opened up new shipping routes through the Arctic. So, according to CBS News, that leans left analysis, an Associated Press analyst noted that more than 2/3 of its territory lies within the Arctic Circle, which has been a major point of North American defense since World War II. AP also highlighted Russian President Vladimir Putin's assertion that he will strengthen Russia's military forces in the Arctic. So, again, this might be a power play. So, Greenland may have significant reserves of up to 31 different minerals, including lithium and graphite, according to a 2023 report assessing the island's resources, wrote the CBS analyst. Both minerals are needed to produce batteries for electric vehicles and a wide array of other technologies. Laurie highlighted the territory as having prodigious reserves of critical minerals and perhaps fossil fuels too. So AP's analysis said, said the resources have attracted the interest of the US and other Western powers as they try to ease China's dominance or of the market for these critical minerals. Now, how could he get it? So CBS cited a poll that showed 85% of Greenlanders did not want to be part of the United States. However, Laurie argued that negotiations with Trump should be in Danish Prime Minister Mette Fredriksen's interest. A lightly armed contingent of American crossing guards could probably take Greenland over in a couple of days, he wrote. The challenge, though, is political and diplomatic, not military. He asserted that the U.S. can almost certainly get whatever it needs from Greenland without violating a friendly country's sovereignty and courting a diplomatic crisis with its NATO allies, appearing to opt for a peaceful solution. Laurie said Trump should realize that making everyone in a friendly nation hate him doesn't help his cause, right? Even the unsentimental results-oriented foreign policy of Donald Trump needs to distinguish between friend and foe. So there's always, there's always a method to his madness. And I think what he really is trying to do is set up America on a path so where we have more independence with our allies in territories so that we aren't stretching ourselves too thin, hopefully not, right? But also having these minerals and resources that can be developed because that creates economic wealth and benefits for the American people. But I just want to get back to policy. If we do not have more astringent policies, and I'll go back to this rampant fraud that's been going on, if we do not handle that, then having all of the access to the resources means nothing. If we do not shut it down and say, if you are here illegally, you shouldn't be working, you need to be deported immediately, you can't come back, that's what we need. Because, when I shared that video on Monday from Chicago Flips Red, where they were talking about how a school, Danny said it, she was like, this trauma bonding that our kids have to do, but if you're an immigrant, you're just in. They don't have to be trauma bonded. They don't have to have low income or one of their parents, in prison or, have all of these things. What? Why are you making all these measures for Americans? But if somebody's an immigrant, they can just get in. And it's not stating their status, not that if they have a green card, if they have a visa, if they're here lawfully in the United States, right? It's just, if they're here, they can be a part of the program if they claim to be a migrant. And tax dollars are paying for in the state of Illinois under Governor Pritzker. Are you guys tired of this man yet? Are you tired of it? Because I mean, I never hear anything good about it. I've never heard anybody say, yeah, Pritzker, he's the best governor going in the history of Illinois. I've never heard anybody talk about him like that ever. And yet he's still supporting illegal immigration on the backs of American citizens. And it's just happening. It's just happening. And it is so sad because, the people of Illinois, they truly don't deserve this. They really don't. And I'm hoping that we get to a point with all of these states that are run by these governors and mayors that are so in the tank for people being here illegally. They're criminals. You are harboring illegals, and it's against federal law. You have violated Title 8, Section 1324, harboring illegal aliens willingly, and you know it. And you're giving them jobs. A lot of people keep saying it's treasonous because they are enemies of this country, and you're giving them aid and comfort. That's like one of the basic rules and principles of treason. But it's hard to prove treason, even though it's blatantly in our face, because you have to have somebody corroborate, right? You have to have somebody sitting there and say, yes, they intentionally said that this is what they wanted to do. So what they're going to say is, well, we felt sorry for these people. They were here. We needed to give them resources. We needed to help them. Well, why aren't you helping American citizens? That becomes a bigger argument. Is it time for us to have tribunals? I'm on that one. I think we need to have some tribunals. I think we need to have people arrested. I think we need to have tribunals, and we need to have people put in prison for life for their crimes against this country, period. We have more than enough evidence to support it. The question is anybody really going to do it? Is anybody really going to step out? Not necessarily like on faith or anything like that. I'm just checking to see if my guest is going to be able to join us this morning. And if not, that's okay. We always have other days, as you guys know. We are going to keep this moving. But it does look like our guests will not be joining us this morning, which is okay. Because whenever they decide to join, we'll make sure that they are given enough time to share with us their platform, and so we can give them our support. All right. But with that, we're going to end the broadcast for this morning. Thank you guys so much for rolling with me this morning. I know the broadcast kind of had a little bit of a slow start. My internet was just not cooperating this morning. It's like, come on. I'm starting a half hour later. You would think it'd be better starting later than earlier. But, technology, it is what it is, right? So we do what we can. But again, thank you so much for joining me here on Women in Wellness Wednesday. And remember, stay well, stay focused, and stay unfiltered. We'll see you in the next one.